Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Brianna Joy Gray joins us to discuss Nina Turner's potential rematch against Shontel Brown in Ohio, and Team Rising is here to discuss that. They'll weigh in on why Californians are moving to Texas as well.
We'll also speak with congressional candidate Amy Villela, but first, Congress is working against the clock to avoid a potential government shutdown. They have until Thursday to pass a bill funding the government. Last night, Senate Republicans filibustered a measure that would have funded the government and suspended the debt ceiling. The vote tally was 48 to 50. 60 votes were needed to overcome the filibuster.
The Republican Party has now become the party of default, the party that says America doesn't pay its debts. Our country is staring down the barrel of two totally Republican-manufactured disasters, a government shutdown and a first-ever default on the national debt. The impacts of both would gravely harm every single American in this country. Republicans would let the country default for the first time in history.
This is beyond a big deal. So let's hope that the Republicans will find enough of them find some level of responsibility to our country to honor what's in the Constitution, that we not question the full faith and credit of the United States of America. They know full well what the consequences are. They preached it when the former president was in office, and we always cooperated. It's always been bipartisan, and it should be again.
For months, Republicans have said they would not raise or suspend the debt ceiling. Here's Mitch McConnell just hours before the vote.
We're willing to work together to keep the government open. We're not willing to help Democrats raise the debt ceiling while they write a reckless taxing and spending spree of historic proportions behind closed doors. Democrats control the entire government, the Senate, the House, the White House. They intend to sideline Republicans and go it alone to slam American families with historic tax hikes and borrowing. So they will need to raise the debt limit on a partisan basis as well. And they've known that for 2 months now. 2 months. Just like then Senator Biden and Senator Schumer voted no on a debt limit increase and made a unified Republican government handle it alone back in the early 2000s.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked how a potential government shutdown would impact the government's response to the pandemic. Here's what she had to say.
It is never a good thing for the government to shut down, and that is why we are doing everything we can to prevent that from happening. Because a great deal of public health, if not all of it, most of the public health work would be exempted from a government shutdown. But that doesn't change the fact that having services shut down, staffing cut in different agencies is not in the interests of addressing any crisis we face, including the pandemic.
So will they continue to work at 100% when it comes to the pandemic response, or what is the preparation for that?
Well, we, of course, as I noted and confirmed last week, we had begun making contingency plans, as every government does, as every Office of Management and Budget does, to plan. But again, public health officials, for the most part, would be exempt. But government shutdowns also are hugely costly. They would include the cutting of staff at a range of agencies. That's not a positive thing, obviously.
Meanwhile, the House is set to vote Thursday on the $550 billion infrastructure bill. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had originally told members there would be no infrastructure bill without reconciliation, but last night she told the caucus the approach had to change, acknowledging that she just didn't have the votes.
Well, it's not exactly that she doesn't have the votes, it's that she doesn't have a reconciliation bill ready yet.
Right.
And so she's going to push forward with the she's claiming she's going to push forward with the infrastructure bill before that's ready. But Republicans are now saying that they're going to force Democrats, just like they're going to force Democrats to pass the debt ceiling suspension all on their own, they're also going to force them to pass the infrastructure bill all on their own. There are about 4 Republicans who have broken with party leadership and have said that they'll help Democrats on this bipartisan infrastructure bill. But McCarthy has said otherwise Pelosi has to get to 218, 217 all by herself. And then after that, If they get over the finish line, then he'll release his members and they can vote for this thing that's very popular. That means that it only is going to take a handful of Democrats to block the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we already have a handful of Democrats. We have 22 publicly on record saying they're not going to vote for it. So Pelosi has said two things that are in contradiction. One, I'm going to have this vote on Thursday. Two, I never put a bill on the floor if I don't have the votes for it. She doesn't have the votes for it, so
Right. That answers that question.
Yeah, we're going to be here Thursday being like, she delayed the vote.
Yeah. I mean, this is, every time this comes up, right, this is such a shameful and embarrassing way to run a country, to run a government where you hurtle toward not knowing if everything's going to shut down.
Yeah.
You know, people, the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people working for the government who don't know whether they're going to be coming to work next week. It's just, no one should think that this is, that this makes any sense, this is good. Even people like me who would actually like to reduce government spending, reduce government employment, we don't do it haphazardly at random because we have no choice, because we have not planned for any contingency.
I think that if the Senate and the House did not have these fake manufactured crises to resolve, then there would be more pressure on them to actually resolve real crises that are actually facing the American people. And so they like the fact that they get to spend all of their time and they get the media chasing them around town talking about, are you going to fund the government? Are you going to create a global financial crisis? Instead of, what are you doing about hunger? What are you doing about education? What are you doing about crime? What are you doing about poverty? What are you going to do to relieve the country of this crisis that you yourself created?
Well, and I have to think that even if it is the case that the government shutdown wouldn't impact the pandemic handling of the pandemic, I have to think the American people are still going to be concerned that it will, and certainly it will at least in a small way. But
sure, right. And like she said, it's not good.
Right.
It costs money.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of way is this to run a country? And on the other side, with the debt ceiling, I don't understand how Republicans think that filibustering the debt ceiling is useful politics for them. I guess they think that it's going to force Democrats to take complete responsibility for it. But it's one thing for Mitch McConnell to say, I'm not going to help Democrats lift the debt ceiling. It's a completely other thing to then go and filibuster it.
Right.
You're then actively blocking Democrats from doing it. But so what's coming on Thursday is this titanic clash again. It came yesterday, progressives won it. It's coming again on Thursday. It's clash between the corporate centrists and the progressives over whether or not they're going to split the infrastructure bill from the reconciliation package. Manchin was just asked about that, and here's what he had to say.
Will that pressure you to vote to support the reconciliation bill? Their threat to hold up the infrastructure bill, will that be enough to pressure you to sign on to something?
I'm not really good on threats.
Do you think your party will it come back up again, Senator? If they vote it down, do you believe infrastructure will just come back up again in the House?
I'll guarantee you this: the infrastructure bill will be passed before November 2022, before the election.
What about the reconciliation bill? Can you
guarantee that bill will be passed before November?
Pretty far away, though.
So what a lot of people haven't picked up on is that last part there where he talks about November 2022. The Josh Gottheimer and these other folks are pushing, we must have the vote on Monday. Okay, it didn't happen on Monday. Now we've got to have it on Thursday. It's so important that we get this bipartisan infrastructure bill passed. And there you have Manchin getting into his sedan saying, it'll happen before November 22. So doesn't that take a significant amount of pressure off of progressives? You have Joe Biden saying there's no rush to pass the bipartisan bill. And now you have Joe Manchin saying November 2022 it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the strategy, right? Wait till there's less heat. I mean, this is such a tense political moment. There could be the idea that you don't want to do something that's going to, raise the ire of the moderates throughout the country, moderate voters, right? Who, or at least like moderation in principle, or think maybe they would actually like aspects of the progressive agenda, but they associate it with the left, and you don't want to, center-right country, got to be careful, et cetera.
Which is why Joe Biden is in some ways the one who's most able to get that agenda across, because he looks like a center-right person. Like, he has a centrist type career, and so people think, oh, well, if he's for it, then it's probably centrist, even if it's a significant rewrite of the social contract around child care, elder care, home care, universal pre-K. But it's cloaked in this feeling of centrism, or this is a reasonable moderate thing.
It is ultimately going to be now. I mean, within before the next election cycle, or never. Right? There's high likelihood there's a Republican House, that it's possible there's a Republican Senate. Even though I would expect Biden to be a somewhat favorite for re-election, then further down the road, it could go, like, these things are close. It could go either way. You have so much time between now and then. You could have total Republican control of the government by the next presidential cycle. Yeah,
and Jamal Bowman just on Twitter this morning just said it out loud. He said, look, we have 1 year left controlling the House and Senate. They don't usually say that out loud. But
it's true.
But it's true.
And the entire Biden presidency could last 8 years, and this is the last year of the Biden presidency in some ways.
Yeah, we've been there before. It was called the Obama presidency. And so he was like, look, abolish the filibuster, get the agenda through, because everything that we just talked about, all these manufactured crises, are a result of the filibuster, the debt ceiling, the government shutdown, all that nonsense. If they could just pass it on a party line vote, we wouldn't have to worry about it. But anyway, we'll tell you what's on our radars up next.